Hi friends, today I want to talk about an old but relevant clip of Neil deGrasse Tyson talking about why he doesn't believe in God, and the issue of suffering is a part of that. Now he's going to approach this with his science-focused lenses, but ultimately this is a rather common argument and something that a lot of people think about and struggle with, and so I think it's good to talk about. But here's him sharing his thoughts.
Do you believe in God?
Me?
Creator?
Yeah, so I'm, the more I look at the universe, just the less convinced I am that there is something benevolent going on. So if your concept of a creator is someone who's all powerful and all good, that's not an uncommon pairing of powers that you might ascribe to a creator. All powerful and all good. And I look at disasters that afflict Earth and life on Earth. Volcanoes, hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, disease, pestilence, congenital birth defects. You look at this list of ways that life is made miserable on Earth by natural causes. And I just ask, how do you deal with that? So philosophers rose up and said, if there is a God, God is either not all powerful or not all good. I have no problems if, as we probe the origins of things, we bump up into the bearded man. If that shows up, we're good to go. Okay? Not a problem. There's just no evidence of it. And this is why religions are called faiths, collectively. Because you believe something in the absence of evidence. That's what it is. That's why it's called faith. Otherwise, we would call all religions evidence. But we don't, for exactly that reason. So I'm given what everyone describes to be the properties that would be expressed by an all-powerful being in the gods that they worship. I look for that in the universe and I don't find it. So I remain unconvinced. But if you've got some good evidence, bring it, bring it, bring it, okay? And so I don't lead with that information because what I believe should be irrelevant to anyone. It's not about me. It's about the real world.
Now, first off, there are a couple of things he said there that I appreciate. One is he mentioned that if during his endeavors he bumps up against the bearded man, quote unquote, that he would be okay with that. That's cool. There's an openness there that I appreciate and I think contrasts against the often more antagonistic approach of a lot of atheists. And the other thing he said right there at the end is that it's irrelevant what he believes. It's not about him. It's about the real world. And I appreciate the humility in that. What he seems to be saying is you have an all-powerful, all-good God. You have suffering. Those things don't compute. This is evidence against God being real. I just want to point out that I don't think this has anything to do with if God is real. I think it has to do with our conception of God. And we can fall into the trap of expecting God to look a certain way. If God is real, he defines everything, right? He defines morality, good and bad, love. And we shouldn't expect that he is going to act a certain way. And only if he acts those certain ways is he real. That doesn't make any sense. And we have to be careful to not assume that God is about us or to load up all of these assumptions about how God would or should act based on our characterizations of him. That's starting from us and reasoning upward to God. Now, if the Bible is truly God's word, this is an accurate depiction of reality, right? And we wouldn't get to define that. But let's get to his assumptions about God. He says God is all powerful, or the philosophers would posit that God is all powerful and all good. And so he seems to be operating on that notion. Now, what does this mean? If I were to take a stab at what he probably means by this, it would be all powerful means that, he's ultimately powerful. And we would align on that. On the all good front, I think this is where we would have to define things. We would have to really think about what all that means. And I think what he's getting at here is God is morally upright. And we would agree, God is morally upright. But Christians would add things to the character of God that are very important to this discussion. We would add that he's loving. He's the standard for loving. Christians would also add his holiness and his perfection. Now, also, anthropology would come into play here. Our characteristics. We would add a recognition of sin and its effects on the world, and we would compare God's holiness with our sin. And the Bible teaches that one of the effects of the fallen world is suffering. Now, he may reject all of that. He may think the Bible is silly, but the Bible has a robust explanation of suffering. We just have to decide what we want to do with that. Now, I think it's also important to think about the implications of this perspective. His perspective means that we have meaningless suffering. Suffering that has no ultimate purpose. The suffering just harshly is. Now, Christians believe that God is sovereign, but he allows this suffering as a part of his plan. And God works all things for his glory and for the good of those who love him. So there's great purpose in every trial, and God is using all of it. It all has meaning. And an amazing example of that is God sending his own son into the world to be a sacrifice for the forgiveness of sins. We see suffering, evil, and purpose and beauty all together. So if you're an atheist because of suffering, you've rejected all of that and you have meaningless suffering. So I just want to make the point that from my perspective, suffering with God and suffering without God, over here in the suffering without God category, that's not a more comforting position to be in, right? Now, another thing he said was that the reason why religions are called faiths is because they are leaps of faith unto belief in God. They are lacking evidence. Now, I have to disagree with his characterization, at least as it applies to the Christian faith, because Christians have always believed that we have evidence for what we believe. And what I mean is we believe that God has revealed himself in ways that demonstrate the truthfulness of the Bible and of Jesus being the Messiah.
He's gonna be killed. He's gonna be cut off from the land of living. He's gonna offer himself as a guilt offering to pay for our sins. And then what? He will see his offspring. He'll prolong his days. This means he's gonna live. He will be killed, but then he'll live. That's called a resurrection, folks, here in Isaiah 53.
Now listen, I understand that many Christians could not give you a robust defense for why they believe what they believe. But that doesn't mean that there's no defense to be made and that there aren't Christians who have defenses and that are thinking about the evidence and are basing their belief on the evidence. Let's just think about the universe. How does something come from nothing? Not an origin point of high density and something and some kind of law that's acting upon that. Nothing. Nothingness. How do the bodies we have now, these beautifully complex super machines with a supercomputer on the top of it, how does that start from nothing, go through this long evolutionary process and end up here? Here's a clip of Andrew Huberman talking about how amazed he is by human biology. He is not a Christian, but he believes in God.
When you start to study and understand brain development, as I did, or neuroplasticity, or dopamine, you have to, meaning I don't care if you're an atheist, agnostic, or believer in creator, you have to step back and just go, wow, wow. Now, then of course there's this difference among scientists as to who believes in God, who doesn't. I'll just go on record. I'm very comfortable saying it. I believe in God. I do. I think there are many things that science can explain. There are certain things science can't explain. But I'll even go a step further, which is that all the elements of science are entirely compatible with the idea of there being a God. And I'm not the first scientist to say this. I mean, Einstein believed in God. Carl Jung, one of the greatest psychologists ever, clearly believed in God. There are many atheist scientists. There are agnostic scientists who are just kind of like unsure, right? And, you know, for me, I'm in absolute awe of biology. It's just incredible that we're sitting here having this conversation. It's with language, that there are little sound waves that you're perceiving and understanding. I mean, it's just, and I think the brain represents the apex of incredible in terms of biology. Like the heart is interesting, the immune system is interesting, the liver is interesting, But the brain is unbelievable.
Yeah.
I mean, think about the number of different ways you can move your body compared to another species. Think about what you did today. Think about what I was attempting to do today, right?
Yeah.
Spectacular. Think about technology. These lights, the, Tesla cars, spaceships. I mean,
Yeah.
the internet. I mean, unbelievable. And yet, oh so real.
Here's another one from Rainn Wilson, a member of the Baha'i faith.
Essentially, there was something that just didn't make sense about it. Try as I might, and I tried for years to just embrace the fact that there was just stuff. There's just stuff. There's 11 billion years ago, there was something that's smaller than the head of a pin, and then there's a universe, and there's, billions of galaxies, and there's physical laws, and there's chemistry, and then for some reason, creatures are born out of chemistry, and chemistry becomes biology. No one knows why. It's just like, it maybe came from an asteroid or lightning hit the ocean and created paramecium. And it's like, okay. It just didn't make sense to me. And I don't even mean like philosophically. I mean like just on a grokking emotional level.
How do we get the processes of nature that would govern the evolutionary process? How did any of this get here? I was learning about the octopus the other day, and it's an amazing creature. Consider the octopus. And then we have the Bible, which is a library of 66 books written by around 40 authors over a period of around 1,500 years. And it's beautifully cohesive and consistent. It is by its nature evidence that Yahweh is the true God and that he exists. So I'm summarizing a bunch of things in this video, but I'm just trying to make a couple points here. One is that we cannot put God in a box and expect him to only exist if he exists in that box.
You look at this list of ways that life is made miserable on earth by natural causes. And I just ask, how do you deal with that? So philosophers rose up and said, if there is a God, God is either not all powerful or not all good.
I think his argument only proves that if there is an all-powerful and all-good God, he allows suffering for some reason. And like I said, the Bible explains that for us, but we have to decide what we want to do with that. But that's about it. Thank you so much for watching. I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. Like and subscribe if you feel like it. Love you guys. God bless.